thanks again, everybody, for joining in the conversation. We're just dropping in the chat where you're from. If you have any questions about the cyber industry or about cyber as a career or about cyber in terms of a business issue or challenge, please drop them into the chat and we'll have questions at the end of the session. And we're going to have Andrea kicking off this evening, followed by Simon. And yeah, we'll just kick off and have a good discussion, hopefully.
Should I start and share my screen?
Yes, let's give it a go.
Okay. Let's just get this going.
Yep, I can see it all right. Looks good.
Great. Now I just hide all your faces down the side here so I can actually see what's going on. There you go. Right, so hi, good evening everybody, and thanks for having us in your living rooms, your kitchens, your bedrooms, whatever it might be. So just a little bit about me. The way I always describe myself is I am a square peg who just refuses to fit in that round hole. So I had to do things my own way. I only got my degree a couple of years ago because I never did it the first time around. And I went back to university and got a BSc in Business Information Systems. And while I was there, I had to do an internship. And I already had a full-time job, which I was juggling. And so I went to the startup and I said, well, could I be your intern, but could I do it on my terms? And the guy there, Mick Fitzgerald, One Page CRM, he was great. And he has a real talent for sort of figuring out who you are and where to put you. And at this time, GDPR was coming in, and he got me because he knew that I loved the legal side and I wanted, a full sort of exposure to the business. And he put me into GDPR. And the whole company had this terrible beginning. They had a presentation that began with a bomb on the screen. And it was, they all had their heads down thinking this was the worst thing ever. And I'm just the eternal optimist. And I just found good in it. And I actually quite enjoyed it. And by the time I finished with them, they all liked GDPR. And so I went off and I set up my own business doing GDPR. And then while I was doing that, and I was always helping people, because obviously the DP of GDPR is data protection. And it's like, well, how are you doing your passwords? How are you protecting your systems? Blah, blah, blah. And through that, I just discovered cybersecurity. And they say that, find the thing that sizzles your bacon. And it was cybersecurity. It was the psychology behind it. It was all the stories. And, definitely the soft skills behind it. I had all them from my background in marketing and sales. And I just thought, this is where I'm going. So now, for me, tonight, you're going to get the best of both worlds. I'm going to do a bit of GDPR and a bit of cybersecurity because they do cross over. And in a startup, you need both. So I'm also a startup. I applied to New Frontiers, which is the Enterprise Island program, because I had this idea that it was small businesses and the startups, the micro enterprise that just had no access to cybersecurity support or training. And I wanted to give them a piece of the cybersecurity pie. So I am in the process of building out CyberPie, which is an all-in-one platform. And so I have lots of hats on tonight because I can understand where you are and I can hopefully help you with the cybersecurity and GDPR. So we're going to start and just sort of cover why it's so important to build cybersecurity and GDPR into your business from the outset. And I'm going to give you some practical advice on what you can do and what you should be aware of. And then Simon's going to give you the technical take on it in a non-tech way, of course, because that's what tonight is. But, everything I tell you tonight, you need to be thinking about it from two sides. One, just in your business operations, and the other in whichever, if you're building a tech platform, you're going to have to build cybersecurity and GDPR for your customers. So with that, if we start now. So, oh God, we've gone one too far. So let's talk about startup life. We all know it. You're juggling all these priorities, none are less important than the next. And, once that song, every day I'm shuffling. And cybersecurity and GDPR just get pushed to the bottom. Maybe it's not even on your radar, especially if you've outsourced the tech side. And, I think one of the problems we have is sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And we live in this world of information overwhelm. So, before you even building your minimum viable product, you need to think, okay, I have to build cybersecurity in there. And you're probably going to use cheap or open source technologies as well. But just because you're using an MVP or a cheap thing, you can't make security an afterthought. You've got to, if you build it into the foundations, it's going to be cheaper in the long run to have it there. And also, when you get to the stage where you're going for, VC investment and that, they're going to want to see all your security and have all this stuff in place. And you do not want to be scrubbing around at that stage, trying to quickly build it on top. And that, when GDPR came out, that's what the companies found so hard, because they had all these processes, all these systems, all this data, and then they were trying to stick GDPR on top. So we sort of say it should be, baked into the organization. Think of it, baking into a cake. And also, once you start attracting real world users, you've got to secure their sensitive personal data. And whether it's when you're in your business, whether it's the people doing the coding or whether it's people in management, you've got to engage them in regular information security training and just start reinforcing best practices and give some awareness around what the security side. And whenever somebody leaves, make sure to revoke all the access to sensitive data. You can never be too careful when you're dealing with sensitive data. So the problem is, you're just expected to wear all these different hats, where we literally only have one head. And your big thing is you've got to build trust and consumer confidence, because otherwise nobody's going to buy from you. They're like, who are you? So cybersecurity and GDPR is actually a really good way of showing how professional you are and building that trust and confidence. And then you need to build that trust with your investors. So, all I can say is just do it from the outset. Don't put it off. So I grew up in South Africa, and our famous saying is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I always, whenever you feel overwhelmed, that's the way to do it. Just take a one bite at a time approach. And I started this with GDPR, saying, look at where are you visible and where are you vulnerable. And then Simon, he has 3 P's. So I was like, oh, I better have 3 V's. So my third one is verify, like just document everything you're doing. But just think, like, where are you going to be the most vulnerable, and tackle that first. So, what's the risk that a server under your control is going to be hacked in the next 12 months? If you've no idea, then just think, okay, well, it's a medium risk. And then now sharpen it up and think, okay, well, how could it be hacked? It's probably not going to be a foreign state attack or anything like that. It's more likely an ex-employee with a grudge. So then you start thinking, okay, well, this is where I can action it and put things in place. And then, for the impact side, instead of trying to gauge the total cost of an event, just break it down and say, well, okay, what about legal fees, fines, developer time, reputational damage, lost sales? And then you'll find you are very, very focused about what to tackle first. And then, obviously, you need to know the trends and the threats out there. And I found this today, and this is based on ransomware attacks. And, you think it's all the big companies and the big multinationals and the sort of obvious targets. But 8% of ransomware attacks last year were on the 1 to 10 size employee business, and 31% on the 11 to 100%. So, just get rid of that thought that it won't happen to me. I'm too small. Nobody's interested in me. So the threats and trends, the biggest one that everybody's concerned about is ransomware. When somebody gets into your system, encrypts your file, and then says to you, right, pay us this much. Now, it used to be that way. Now, it can also be that they've got in there beforehand and they have all your customer data. Sometimes they go to your individual customers and try to blackmail them. And it can be small amounts. They do their research. They say, oh, this record would be worth 200 euros. So they go to each customer and say, if you don't want your details made public, it's 200 euro. But if you've got 50,000 people on your database, that adds up. So ransomware as a service is just a growing trend, because you don't need to be techie. You don't need to do anything. You can go into the dark web and you can buy a ready-made ransomware package and just send it out. And so that, this is where you've got to come in with your backup, because if your files were encrypted, can you carry on? What have you got in place? One of the other ones is the Internet of Things, the devices. You've got things like light bulbs, fridges, kids' toys, and a lot of these products, security is not their first consideration. And so that's another risk you need to get somebody to come in and have a look at, or just consider for yourself. And then the old favorite, phishing, smishing and vishing. We were talking now that I got a phishing message today, and it was a text message from Coinbase where I bought a little bit of Bitcoin. And I thought, well, and it said my account was compromised. Now that's a really specific one, because nobody knows I have a Coinbase account. Well, you all do now. But they obviously had, Coinbase were obviously compromised. So they have my details. So as soon as I see it's Coinbase, I trust it because I know Coinbase. And I nearly clicked the link because I don't want my account compromised. That's got my card linked to it, etc., etc. So all these scams are becoming more and more sophisticated and harder to recognize. And we're multitasking. You might be homeschooling. You're working from home, your guard's down, maybe you were doing flex time, so you're working in the evening, doing a bit of internet shopping, glass of wine, all it takes is one click. So you really have to raise awareness around that. And then, social engineering, or what they call people hacking. And this is where they appeal to our vanity, our ego, our emotions, our publicity. So, imagine if you announced you just got given some great funding and you're in all the papers and you're looking fantastic. Just think of the fraudster out there who thinks he might email you the next day with a follow-up on this award. We just need your bank details because we've got a further award for you that we forgot to tell you about. They're appealing to your ego and your vanity, and it's the modern day con man. He doesn't knock at your front door now, he knocks at your digital door. And then, mobile devices, you probably have a lot of your customer data, a lot of your business data on your phone now. You can't discount your phone as a device. So, don't panic. I think we all make this mistake in cybersecurity, and we kind of scare everybody and say, God, it's awful, da 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 da. And then it's like the smoking adverts, you just change the channel because it's just too much. So there are things you can do, and if you walk away tonight, just do one thing, and that's it, that one bite at a time thing. So, cybersecurity software, when we're all starting out, we kind of go for the free versions, free antivirus, free anti-spam, free firewall software. They're okay, but they're initial layer of protection. But if it's free, you haven't got all the extra security built in. Just upgrade to the paid versions, and you unlock all the security features. And by just installing software, that's not enough to mitigate against all the security risks. You need to be doing things like keeping your website updated, patching, going, all the apps you have on your phone, on your computer, you need to update them all the time, because there's always vulnerabilities in there. And then the other one is, cloud storage. Obviously, you've got to have a backup. And they always say, have a backup in two places, have it on a hard drive and in the cloud, and then test it, make sure your backup works. The amount of people that have a backup and then the worst happens and then they go to their backup and actually it doesn't work. So, these are things that you need to be asking your developers and putting into place when you're building your own platforms. And then it's just follow best practice. This is the simplest and the cheapest way for any company to improve its cybersecurity. So no matter how secure your systems are, you're always vulnerable to human error through either general indifference or incompetence or just life. We are humans. That's why it's called human error. And the moment you give someone access to a system, they can abuse that access or allow it to be used by someone else, either deliberately or unknowingly. So you have to limit admin access to those who absolutely need it. And you need to record who's got access to what, because it can run away with you and then people come and go, and you might find people you had working on your system still have the passwords, and who knows where they are now. But so the key to this is just training, and every single person in your organization needs to be made aware of how to proceed, what they can do, what they can't do. Putting time and money into training courses, it's a short-term drain on your resources, but it is justified. And it's that old thing, start as you mean to go on. And then a big sort of area to look at is your third parties. Anybody who you work with, whether it's you using MailChimp or you using a developer or even your accountant, anybody who has access to your data, they have to follow the same security protocols that you do, and you need to have contracts in place to cover this, to protect yourself, And definitely, you know, include your IT people in this when you're vetting your vendors. You need an agreement in place with your IT developers, and you need to go through their proposals and check what the security risks are, what security they have in place before you sign a partnership. And this is part of GDPR, you have to do this. And it just saves you that potential of damaging your reputation in the future. And keep a register of it. So everybody who's a third party who you share data with, whether it's MailChimp, Gmail, Dropbox, Amazon, you need a third party register and with these agreements in place. And also, you know, we small businesses, we all store hundreds and hundreds of different programs, subscribing to this service and that service, all sharing data. So the more points of access there are, the more vulnerability there is. So, you know, it's hard to keep a castle secure when it's got hundreds of doors. So, you know, think about all the systems that you use, and maybe it's better to have several tools from one supplier so you've got more control over it. Especially with like people build WordPress websites and you've got all these plugins. I mean, that's just hundreds and hundreds of people that have access to your data. And then, you know, there are so many resources out there, like in the Republic of Ireland, dataprotection.ie has a number of sort of publications they've put together, which is cybersecurity guidance, what you should be doing. And they have one specifically for small enterprises. In the UK, it's the ICO. They also have some brilliant resources. SANS.org, you can go on there. A lot of training templates, a lot of standard policy documents. They're all free. It's a good place to start when, you know, you don't have a lot of money to spend. Obviously, here we have Cyber Island. And then, you know, please reach out to me if there's anything I can do or help. Even if it's just a query about the basics of GDPR, just start thinking about it. You know, even the big companies have not got their GDPR ticked and done. So don't feel you have to have it perfect. But if there's an area you're unsure of, rather get some advice and deal with it then and there. It's so much easier at that, you know, at this stage in your journey. So on that note, I am going to stop sharing my screen and pause for breath.
That was brilliant, Andrea. You know, it's really kind of pulling out some of the key themes in terms of what to think about, you know, from a cybersecurity. And we do a lot more online, particularly in the cloud now, and using a lot more software applications. And it does definitely gets you thinking. So no, I really appreciate that. It was really good whiz through some thoughts. And we'll move on to Simon and we'll come back for questions, or do you want to take some questions now? Up to you.
Let's go to Simon because maybe he might cover something I haven't. And then I'm sure he's desperate to start his, you know, have his turn now.
Absolutely. So is that okay, Jenny? Will I kick off then? Yep. Brilliant stuff. Okay. Let me just chuck that up on the screen. And you should also be lucky enough to be able to see me now as well. Can I just get a thumbs up to see that you can see me? Yeah, brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Jenny. So firstly, thank you very much, Andrea. I thought it was really interesting and you know, lovely to see. So the sharing of views here amongst, you know, people like ourselves who talk cybersecurity, you know, a lot. I would say is an understatement. I am CEO of Vertical Structure. We're a small cybersecurity firm in Belfast. We tend to work in lots of different places. We work in lots in Northern Ireland, a lot in the Republic, a lot of stuff over in financial services firms in England. So if you're in a fintech firm, you know, we've been working in that area for a long time as well. Insurance companies, some of the real big ones, we have as clients as well. Just very briefly, you know, how I got into security, because I think, you know, it's interesting sometimes to hear about how people have done this. I used to be a software developer, so I was developing in PHP and before that and after that in a language called Cold Fusion, and I used to work with oil and gas companies, and we were helping them to understand supplier performance management in various parts of the world. And we used to work in America. We used to work in the Middle East. We used to work in Europe. We were in lots of different places, and some of the biggest names in the world. And it was really interesting because security was never mentioned. Security was never a thing in any way, shape or form. And this was back in 2006. And then we started working with a Russian oil and gas firm. And the Russian oil and gas firm, their first question was, have you ever been security tested? Have you ever been penetration tested? And we said, no, but don't worry about it. We're really good at this stuff. We'll be absolutely fine. It'll all go really well. So just, throw everything you can at us. So they did, and within 3 minutes, they'd broken into our application and started stealing all the information from it. Within 20 minutes, they actually stopped the testing of the application because they had just got too far. They didn't know where to go next, essentially, is what they found. And for me, it was a bit of a turning point because as a developer, as a maker, I had seen all of these things. I could see how they were getting in. I could see what they were doing, but I hadn't put two and two together. And it was fantastic. It was a real turning point, as I say, in my career. So I moved from being a maker into a breaker. I started learning how to break applications, and I've been doing lots and lots of interesting bits and pieces in that sort of world for a while now. My firm's been going since about 2010. I think we start doing it in earnest. And we now do 3 different areas, really. So we do training, so we do non-technical training, but we also do very, very technical training where we teach you how to break things. So we got a great experience of sharing how we break things and how we expect, kind of the bad actors out there to break things as well. And we also do AWS courses. We're an AWS certified consulting partner, and we're really good at doing all of those bits and pieces. So that's always good. From a protect side, we do a lot of work around breaking other people's stuff. So we teach people how to break things, and we also break things ourselves. And we have a really good, dedicated group of breakers based in Belfast. And it's all human focused. So it's all about how a human would break into these applications. So it can be really fun. And then from the Persist side, we think about security all the way through your application and all the way through your company. So instead of it just being about, for instance, security one time period a year for 10 days when we come in and are permitted to break your stuff, break your applications, it's all about bringing security mindset into your firm, into your organization. Okay, so that's the kind of areas in which we've been doing things. We work with everybody from 2-person startup companies, in Ormo Baths in Belfast, for instance, when we all used to have offices, through to some of the largest companies in the world. So it's a really good mixture of things. And I want to start by just talking about, why is security important? Well, obviously, it's all about protecting your assets. Andrea spoke brilliantly about some of those areas in which you really need to think the areas in which you need to be protecting yourself. From my side of things, it's all about understanding what information you're holding and therefore what you should be doing to secure it. So I put down just a few areas for, when you're starting your firm, when you're starting to consider security, think about what is important to you. It's also important to understand, controlling physical access to your infrastructure. We're all working in home environments now. We used to work in offices with lots of key tags to get into the office and all of those sort of bits and pieces. And now we've got all I have to protect my laptops is a window over there. I've got to be confident that if someone were to break into my place wearing a buffalo mask, that I would be that things would be okay. Think about enforcement of clear desk policies. Even at home, think about having a lockable filing cabinet for when you're in the for when you're working. Because if data is stolen, if information is stolen from your home, or from your office, it can leave you in a bad way. And also access control for joiners and leavers. It's very, very important to be having these things in place. So what I also want to kind of touch on is where this information goes to. So what the cybercrime landscape looks like. And, I thought I'd talk a little bit first about some of these breaches and these compromises and where we've come from and where we're going. So This is back in 2015, as you can see here. Moving on to 2017, probably everyone remembers the Equifax compromise from around then. It was a big deal. Look at these ones here. We were talking just before everybody else joined us just now about, these two are particularly relevant to the UK market. As Andrea said earlier, these fines started off as, I believe, up to about 250 million combined, and went down to about 45 million combined, which is still a fair amount of money, but still a massive reduction. So this is where the data gets pinched, it gets taken to, where does it end up after that? Well, it ends up on these dark markets. So if your data gets compromised, this is where they can end up. Things like Alphabet, which is, we'll put a line through that, that's dead. I think that one's dead now as well. But all of these markets, they die and then they pop up again, like the famed snake from Greek mythology, which grows new heads each time. And in here, we can see the value of this data. So what have we got here? These are screenshots from various dark markets that we've identified here. So there's Yahoo email addresses, 432 million email addresses and passwords for sale for $250. It's not a lot, is it? That's not a huge amount. Say, for instance, you manage to get into other people's systems, that $250 could be very well spent. Booking.com, there's one up here, where you can see that's $3. $3 for account with payment method. Well, that's going to be a useful thing for starting your phishing campaigns and starting your attacks. And then you look further at the value of this data, and you see that when your machines get compromised, this is also what happens. So this is taken from the 14th of December 2020. These are machines that are being sold. The access to them is being sold on the dark markets. As you can see here, they have access to these following sites. So this first one is logged into 3.co.uk, dropbox.com, Amazon, Lloyd's Bank, lots and lots of useful information being stored in there. And I think it's also important to consider, the stock image. And I think that no cybersecurity presentation is really complete without a man in a balaclava. In this case, it's a man in a balaclava wearing a pair of gloves because he's obviously operating in some kind of cold environment. This chap here who can't work out where the Zoom function is on his laptop here, and finally the Guy Fawkes mask that has become so kind of linked with these compromises. If I was in my office right now, I'd be able to reach down into my desk drawer and put on my own Guy Fawkes mask, but you'll just have to pretend for now. So that's the stock image, but what's the reality? Well, the reality is that these are firms that look and operate very like your company. They have development teams, they have marketing departments, they have customer onboarding, they have user ticket management, they have stand-ups and scrums and all of that sort of stuff that that you will be doing on a regular basis. It's a business, and they're making a lot of money out of it. So what I wanted to as well cover was to give you some kind of understanding of what areas that you can where you can improve. So what I want to do is to kind of talk about something that was quite relevant recently. You probably all come across the SolarWinds issue. Okay, so turns out that this was a piece of software that was used by a lot of US government organizations. And you can see here, this is a partial customer listing. Look at that, US Air Force, Lockheed Martin, City Financial. I mean, there's a good few names in there that would be interesting to attackers, aren't there? But a lot of smaller firms, maybe like yourselves as well. So, it was a piece of software used for monitoring internal software. Okay. They were compromised, and that led to their clients being compromised as well. So as Andrea said earlier, the supply chain attack, the third-party attack, which took place, which then compromised the real targets, which were people like McDonald's, Lockheed Martin, US Air Force, Department of Justice, things like that. And yes, there was there were some pretty heavy technical things that were going on there. But guess what? One of the biggest issues with SolarWinds was. Anyone kind of want to chuck anything in the chat there? Anything? Can you kind of come up with any thoughts about what the easiest way in which this users may have been able to get into the systems? Let's see. Well, the answer is passwords. Thank you, Claire. Yes. Yes, crappy passwords, same passwords. Actually, the passwords for a couple of their systems were this: SolarWinds 123. That's not great, is it? That's not something that you want really to be considering. So what I would suggest you do, one of the most important things I think you can do, is to consider your password exposure. Okay, so are you listed on any of the password breach databases? Have you got any? Any visibility of that? Have I been pwned.com is one place you can go for that. There are, and you can verify whether things have been compromised. Just from a cybersecurity perspective and from the work that we do, there are also other sites where your passwords are exposed to us. If we pay the right amount of money and you put your email address in, then we can actually find out what password you were using on that site. So that's definitely something to consider. I also thought it'd be useful to ask for questions that you should ask your developers. So what should you be asking the people who are creating your software? Well, I think business continuity plan. How would they recover in case of disaster? How would they be able to continue? Your data storage location. Where are you storing your information? Is it on some, really rubbishy little server over in the United States somewhere that's, running on a VM or worse? What's your transition plan? If you wanted to move from one provider to another, how would you do that? Would they give you the code? Do you own the code? We've seen in the past people who haven't actually owned the code that's being written. What's their compromise plan? If their stuff is compromised, if their systems are compromised, how would they do it? And for me, a massive one, and Andrea mentioned it when it came to contracts, but we were auditing a firm a while back, and it was really disappointing because they contracted a company in Eastern Europe to do the application and create it, all built in AWS. It was fantastic, really good piece of kit and really good development. Turns out it was a financial services firm, millions of pounds flowing through their books, and the company in Eastern Europe owned the AWS account. They didn't have a contract in place between the company and the development company. They didn't have anything in place to say who owned the data, who owned the information, and how the data should have been processed. So that's quite terrifying, really, especially from the fact that should something go wrong or that AWS account is compromised, that you as the owner would be, or as the person responsible would be left would be in trouble. So I also thought about security testing. I think that's really important. So do what write down how you're testing your software, and then do it. Actually include that as part of your software development. Think about your threats and think about your threat modeling, and make sure that you're kind of thinking about these threats ahead of time. So what I am always very conscious of is, and I'm very aware of the fact that security is a difficult thing to fit in, but it's really important to fit it in. So, does it go in between pointing fingers and throwing grenades, or just before we start fighting our fires? Or, what we tend to find is that we get called in just in between prayer and launch. That's the wrong time to be thinking about security. Security is part of this. Security is part of the whole process. You should be all information and cybersecurity professionals. There are some fantastic stories and books that you can read. Andrea is going to mention one, I would say, in a wee minute, that we were talking about before. If I could put a big shout out to the Unicorn Project by a chap called Gene Kim. If you've not read that, just genuinely go and pick up a copy immediately. It's absolutely fabulous. And it talks about bringing security into your firms, okay? And I'm going to leave you with a nice tweet that I found on Tinternet the other day that I think sums up some of the work that we, some of the ways in which we feel. This is willing to bet that Rick Astley has done more to prevent folks clicking on unknown links than all cybersecurity training combined. So if you've ever been Rickrolled, you've ever received that link, which that brings you to Rick Astley, never going to give you up, then you will understand what I mean. Okay, so from a technical level, I'm very happy to take any questions, and please throw them into the chat, or I think Jenny, are we okay just unmuting mics and stuff as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a good couple of questions coming through, and we'll get through those. And then if you want to unmute or turn on your videos, please do so. So with one from Claire for Andrea, around kind of the recent news articles about insurance companies paying for ransom demands. I mean, you were talking about America and the UK earlier, and how's that going to look? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've been trying to do a lot of research around cybercrime and really small businesses, and there's no statistics and that, because nobody is ever going to go, oh, guess what? We got hit by cybercrime last week. I mean, you ask people about their security and it's like asking about their sexual health. You will not get any information. And I think the same probably applies to fines. Of course, you shouldn't pay ransom demands. Of course, you should never pay the blackmailer, because that's just saying it's okay. And then they just go on to do more and more and more. But we know that people are paying. I mean, they never own up to it. I think Travelex, they had to have paid, because how else did they get their data back? They were down for months, and then all of a sudden. So of course you shouldn't pay, and you should always report it to the Garda. They have a whole cybercrime division, and sometimes the more people that report it means they can follow the trail, and they can catch them. But it's like everything in life. You have to be practical and pragmatic. If it's your business and you don't have a backup, and it's a case of going under, in all honesty, what are you going to do? I mean, it's hard to judge until that's you. But all I can say is don't let it be you. Cybersecurity is that thing you'd always wish you'd done. It's, the blue screen of death, when your computer's playing up and you think, oh, must get that looked at. Then you get the blue screen of death and you're like, shit, why didn't I do it? It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good answer. It's a good answer. Claire, does that help?
I was just curious because they reported in the BBC, anyone who's got cyber insurance now, it's like, I suppose it's like car insurance. It's cheaper for the insurance company to pay the ransom than it is to rebuild the network. So there is obviously amongst the security group that there would be concerns that it's driving ransomware, but it's one of the things that they're starting to do more and more of, and whether it should be made an illegal act to pay ransomware.
Yeah, but you see, it goes on, because with GDPR, if you got a GDPR fine, your cyber insurance is not going to cover that. And we were saying today, like in America, your cyber insurance can actually cover your regulatory fines and stuff. But with GDPR, if you have a data breach, you have to report it within 72 hours. If you don't, you've got something to hide. So you're already in big trouble. And then you're burying your problems, and they're going to come out for you. So report them, and at least try and avoid those fines, because if you report it, everybody can deal with it. Whereas when you try and bury it, that's when you're just asking for trouble.
I
think there was another GDPR question in there, wasn't there?
If I could just jump in on that as well, I just wanted to just from my side of things as well. So we work with a lot of firms who get compromised, and we help them to understand. And we've actually done 2 in the last 2 weeks. People who've had bad WordPress installations that they haven't updated, which have been compromised, and they've been it's been stolen. Found out that one of them actually had been there since 2018. And they hadn't realized that their systems were compromised for over 2 years then. So, that's a serious issue. We have very good relationships with the police service of Northern Ireland here, and with the with the cybercrime team especially. And what we always advise our clients to do when in this situation is, that when we finished our report, that they allow us to redact it and provide it to the PSNI and join that conversation together, because our Protect officer, who is a chap called Sam Kincaid, who's fabulous, absolutely brilliant. His job is to help people who are in these positions, in this position. And if he can prevent people from getting in that position in the first place, then he will do so. So he goes around talking and sharing that information together in a really good anonymous fashion. So if you are having problems, if I can help to join people together with the PSNI, if anything does happen, please do let me know. I can do introductions. The other thing I would say is just around the payment of the ransoms. Firstly, there's a fantastic site called nomoreransom.org. So if you are experiencing any ransomware type attacks, No More Ransom, you can upload 2 files that have been compromised, and they will, and it should be able to tell you whether it can be unlocked, whether they've got the keys for that piece of ransomware, and if it can, then it will help you to get sorted. It's run by Europol and Kaspersky and McAfee and lots of other people like that. So, you know, it's a good site, and I know the guards are really big on supporting that. You know, they've always been big supporters of that. That's what I'd say. The other thing that I just wanted to say was around. Sorry, Andrea.
Just get professional help. You can't manage it on your own, and even if you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee you'll get your files back.
Absolutely, and the No More Ransom will help you to understand it more, at least. The other thing I would just say around support, around payment of ransom, is that I know that there was discussion on you know, a while back about there was a firm who had paid, and there was discussion about whether they were supporting crime by doing that, and whether they were making payments to sanctioned countries. So if the organization who's compromised you is based in Russia, then potentially you might be committing a crime by paying because you are sending money to sanctioned organizations or sanctioned people. So that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to, you know, speak to professionals about it should you have any problems.
Some really good answers there. I mean, that initial shock, I guess, of, you know, being hacked, no matter whether it's personal or business, is, you know, panic. And if you try and take a pragmatic approach, like you said, and ask for help, then, you know, there's people out there that can work through the process. So that's really good advice. We had a question come through from David, more on the GDPR side of things. David, do you want to ask that?
Yeah, so the question's more about like what sort of data can a startup, say like a Saas product, collect without like having to actually get consent, I suppose, to do stuff with. So for example, can you collect IP addresses and stuff like that if you're logging them for security purposes, sort of in the same way that you would be maybe putting like a CCTV camera at your office door?
It's such a hard question. So when you start out, you need to sit down and ask yourself, take every piece of data that you're collecting, whether it's first name, date of birth, whatever, and you literally have to put it in a spreadsheet. And then you have to say, okay, why do I need it? And you have to assign a purpose to it. So an email address might have 4 purposes. One is to send a newsletter, one is to send an invoice, one is to communicate with, and you have to assign a purpose, and you can't change your mind about that purpose. That's why Twitter got a fine. They got your mobile phone number to do the 2-factor authentication, right? And then they started sending advertising messages using that phone number. That's purpose. So you have to assign a purpose to it. And if you change the purpose, you have to change your privacy policy. Then you have to say, well, what's the legal basis we're collecting this on? So one of them could be consent. So I've got your email address, you ticked a box saying, yes, I want to receive newsletters from you. And it was an active consent. It was like, yes, I want this. You didn't coerce me into it. I didn't have to download a white paper. I didn't have to give this in return for downloading a white paper. It's just like, yes, I want this. So that's consent. The other one you can use is performance of contract, which is a great one, because obviously you and I need to communicate to do business. Simple one. Then the other one is legitimate interest. And this is the gray area where everybody jumps in. Bottom line is you can say, well, it's in my business interests to, I don't know, if I run a restaurant, maybe it's for customer service and to run my business well. If I send you a post-meal survey, that's legitimate interest. It's not really marketing. But does it kind of outweigh the rights and privacy of the person? You know, you have to look at their side. So sending them a survey, it's neither here nor there. They're not going to be upset. You're not going to offend anybody. The world's not going to end. But if it was something else like something really, well, with the mother and baby home, with the leaving cert, things like that, then you're thinking, okay, hold on, is this overriding the privacy and the rights of the person? The other one is employee surveillance. You know, all these people that are working at home now, and you've got tracking on their laptops and stuff, so the company can see that their staff are still working. So the company is saying, well, it's in our legitimate interest to make sure that these young Gen Zs are not on TikTok all day. But yeah, it's home surveillance now. So you're actually in their house watching them. Is that okay? Is that legitimate interest? So there's something called a data protection impact assessment. So in a situation like that, you have to then go through a whole procedure and look and think, well, was there a less intrusive way I could have done it? And if there is a less intrusive way, you can't call a legitimate interest. So, you know, my 3 V's, and the third one is verify. When you're having these conversations, document them, because that's what's going to cover you. CCTV, you have to tell people that they're being filmed. You have to tell them how long you keep that footage for. I think it's 30 days you can keep it. And obviously you have to put all of that in your privacy policy. So if somebody comes to your place of work or whatever, they've got access to see what data you collect, who you share it with, how long you keep it for, what their rights are. So that's what that privacy policy is, because the GDPR is that principle of transparency. You have to tell people what you're doing. You can't hide it. The long answer to a short question.
No, it was brilliant. Thank you very much for that answer.
You know what? I can summarize it in one thing. It's a surprise test. If you do something with somebody's data and they're surprised, you fail GDPR. So if you send somebody something, or they get a call from somebody who left your business, who stole your mailing list, if they're surprised, you fail GDPR. So if you're doing anything, just think, would the person be surprised to know I had this data, or I was doing this with the data? It comes down to.
That's a great answer. Yeah, no, thank you. Another question from Claire for Simon, and around should you pen test your software before undertaking third-party trial?
Well, obviously, as a pen testing company, Claire, I think, yes, you should pen test everything all the time, without question. But yeah, sorry, just feel free to expand.
Can I ask, do you know what it is? So I have a product, and I was chatting with a pen tester today, but I have lots of friends who are developing Saas products that are not in the cyberspace and are rolling out trials. And somebody was chatting to me the other day, and they're rolling out a trial in the HSE in the south.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned how they pen tested, they says, no, sure, we're only at trial stage. And I had a mini heart attack that they were rolling this out with the HSE, even in a trial, and not having kind of looked at the security. So I'm keen to see your thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great. And what I would say is that security testing and penetration testing is, I think, a really important part of every release of software. I think that you have to understand the software and the flaws, because what we find is that people are very, very good at making making things, but they're not good at switching on the evil bit. They're not good at pulling the balaclava down or putting the Guy Fawkes mask on or whatever it is, and thinking as the bad people are doing, as the bad actors are doing. And that's one of the flaws that we see frequently with developers and testers as they come through our courses and things like that, is that they are brilliant at what they do. But the testers, for instance, that what they want to do is they want to make sure that button does what it's meant to do. But what happens if you click it twice, or you click it and then go back and then see what happened? Things like that, I think, are really, really, really important to be doing. So yes, I think security testing, I think, is it's a vital part of the process. I think that when you're collecting health information, then or a special category, or sensitive data, sensitive personal data, then yes, you need to be showing that you're protecting it and you've done everything you can to protect your information. I think it's absolutely vital. So it's great to hear, Claire, that you're going through that process. I am very disappointed to hear that it's not with us, but but it really is fantastic. Just having a conversation about security can sometimes be enough. Enabling that conversation can sometimes be the way to go. If we think about especially that health information, over the course of the last, it feels like 75 years, but I think it's only 9 or 10 months since COVID hit these shores. But since that time, we've worked on a lot of applications that have been trials to go into health trusts in the north here, and we've it's been fascinating to see everything from booking in systems so that they can test the appointments and test their people's symptoms and things like that. But they all require to be tested, in some way, shape, or form. What I would also say, just to kind of square the circle, or some other horrendous management phrase, but what I would also say is that sometimes you need to go beyond testing the application. So, if you consider the fact that your application is being stored in AWS, let's say, or in Azure, or in, insert cloud provider here, if you consider that that's the case, then, if I was attacking your application, then something I would probably try to do first is to attack your infrastructure. So can I get into your Google, your GCP, your Google Compute platform? Can I get into your AWS environment and attack that? Do you have terrible passwords in place on your AWS infrastructure? If you do, that's where we're going to go, because then I don't need to worry about whether you've enabled encryption. I don't need to worry about fancy web application breakages and things like that. All I need to do is to log in with a really bad username and password and get out, get all the information I need.
Now, the other thing I would say is, don't assume that IT people or your web developer is a security person. The amount of websites that get built that have zero security in them. I was asked to do security awareness training for a company that had developers on site. I was like, you can't ask me to train them. I felt, and they said, have a look. And the one developer had the passwords for everything on a post-it on his screen. So just do not assume that IT or anything to do with computers equals security. And the other one, my favorite saying is, compliance does not equal security. You can have the best GDPR in the world, all your policies, everything. The bad actor, he's not going to go in the drawer and check your policies before he breaks in. It's very, you need it, and it's very nice to have, but it means nothing, if you're still vulnerable, because all it takes is one person to click the wrong thing or somebody to give access to something.
Around the table in the startup world, we often have conversations about the hackathon. So, coming together with an idea and trying to make something as a team. And I'm interested, you mentioned obviously being a hacker, and the two are side by side. You're hacking for good or you're hacking for bad. But in the instance that you're hacking for good, how, if a startup is thinking that way of getting their friends to hack together a solution, how can they protect that at that really, really early stage, and we've seen hackathons in Belfast of, just get together and make a product for good or for whatever reason. But it's just that, it's great at idea stage, but then when it becomes commercial, I guess you have to think a wee bit more professional about it.
Yeah, and yes, and and that's what's so interesting is when you see these firms starting from literally three friends gathering together and thinking, here's a good idea, and that's fabulous. That's exactly where what we want to see. And some of the biggest companies have come from that sort of thing. Look at Steve and Woz in a garage in Cupertino, wherever it was, and Bill Gates, and they all start in that sort of way. They were privileged enough to that security didn't exist back then. I'm joking, of course, but security was something that they were able to do later on. But in this case, one of the things you can do while you're hacking and cracking and playing around is to keep all of your infrastructure internal. So if you are playing around, then make sure that what you're doing is when you're running your AWS environment, don't give things external IP addresses. There are ways in which when you're running it, just untick the box, and then you have to be on that network. So then you have to actually break in to be able to get access to it. To Andrea's point there, about the technical people as well. I use this to kind of talk to people about why security is important, and this is a tool called Showdown, and Showdown basically goes around the whole of the internet from 0.0.0 4 zeros, I think there are, or sorry, I can't remember how many I got to there, but all the way through to 255, which is all of the IPv4, as we call it, internet space. Okay, it scans through the whole of the internet to try and find interesting things. And in this case, what it does is if it finds a desktop that's open to the internet, if it finds a webcam that's open to the internet, if it finds, you know, a remote desktop, then it will take a picture. So a lot of these things are going to be technical people who have set these up and then just left them open to the world. Okay, so you can see in here, this is a Windows Server 2012 R2 server just sitting out for anybody to have a play with, to try some passwords. Look at that. There's another one, Tech Admin, along with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 users listed along there. Okay, so the challenge has now gone from let's find an open server that we want to play with, through to we've got an open server we can play with, we've got a username, and we maybe have an email address or a user associated with it that we can then go and grab the details of from elsewhere. So, you know, in many cases, that's the kind of, you know, tech, the tech people make as many mistakes as everybody else. You know, I think it's absolutely right. So yeah, so testing is important, even at these early stages, even in those, you know, with those kind of, you know, with your tech people involved.
And I think you mentioned earlier, just from kind of learning about more about cybersecurity, Andrew, you mentioned in our chat before we started a book that, you know, even if you're thinking about it from an industry or a career, or even just interested in cybersecurity, you mentioned a book. What was it again?
I said, if you want to kind of read about it, it's called Confident Cybersecurity by Jessica Barker. And it's just in plain English, really straightforward, really interesting, takes you from, you know, the very basics right up. So especially if in your organization, if you are the startup and so you're that person with 54 hats, one of your hats is probably going to be security awareness training. And you're going to have to do that. And you cannot do it once a year with a video that you bought off somebody and sit somebody in a dark room. The best description I heard was a guy said, like, if you have teenagers, you don't tell them about drugs once a year, you know, by showing them a 1-hour video. It's a drip feed thing that you feed to them over time. And you have to create that culture of awareness, but openness as well, so that if somebody in your organization does press the wrong button or does do something in a sort of moment of weakness or whatever, that they don't feel like, oh shit, like I'm going to get fired, I'm not going to tell anybody about this, because that's the worst thing that can happen. You want them to know that there's solutions, there's options, you've got a plan, it's open, we all learn from mistakes. You really, if you build something into your business from the outset, that's the thing, that's security awareness, and get them excited about cybersecurity. I love the stories behind it. The other one is, I think, do you know Jeff White, who wrote crime.com? Oh my God, he's brilliant. So he takes it back right from like the very first, the love bug and all the stories like that. And it's the best novel you can buy. So, you know, in your organization, find your champion, somebody who's like me, who gets excited by the stories, and then they'll be the one who builds security into your business. And it shouldn't be like, you know, saying that company that started their presentation with GDPR with like a picture of a bomb. It shouldn't be that feeling. It should be an exciting thing, something fun, something interesting. If there's a story in the news, then talk about it, like, because then you learn from the stories. That's how we teach our children. That's how we learn from the stories, and they're shareable. And they, you know, like the Nancy Pelosi thing, when there was that picture of her computer where it had no screen lock. So they ran away and her computer was there for everybody to see. That's the best lesson you could teach somebody. Like, all they needed to do was put a screen lock on. It's much better than somebody in a room where you must do this, do your compliance, blah, you know, it's like you just switch off to that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's fascinating. You know, it's a passion project. I used to work for a well-known company in Northern Ireland, a big wholesale company, and they got hacked. And, you know, as a marketeer in that company, we were still trying to do our job and still trying to, you know, do marketing. And it just was fascinating to watch how they dealt with it. And they dealt with it really well and managed to contain it. But it was 3 months before everything was back up and running again, you know. So I find it a really fascinating topic. And I mean, guys, if you've got any more questions in here, or we do a couple of roundup summaries before we finish off. Any more questions? Hands up, cameras on.
I saw a question just came in directly to me there, which was just asking about, should we encourage startups and services to host products and services outside of the 5 Eyes territory? So, you know, the kind of the the people who like to look at things they shouldn't necessarily look at, or is that going a bit too deep state, or kind of going in the wrong direction? I mean, personally, whenever I'm doing discussions about threat modeling, we talk about categorization of attackers. And I think it's really important to understand the attackers you could be facing. You've got everything from script kiddies to, security researchers to, someone who stumbles across something. And actually, one of the areas in which we don't spend too much time is around nation state attack and things like that. And I'll tell you the reason why is because if GCHQ would like to get into your systems and into your software, then they're going to do it. They're just gonna. That's the way it works. If the NSA in states, if they want to get in, it's happening. Same for the Chinese cyber team and the Russian cyber teams and all that sort of stuff. I mean, there will be ways in which things will happen, whether they're warrant based or not. It's important to be realistic about your threats and about your issues that you could be facing. So from my point of view, I would always suggest that what you're doing is you're defending your systems in the best way that you can. The person who is more dangerous to you is a disgruntled employee who has left the firm with a key password to your systems. They are much more dangerous than an NSA employee who has been told to get a piece of information. They can do untold damage to your organization, and will probably have a cause behind them to do it and a reason to do it. So what I would always say is defend in the best way you can. Always put in place things like encryption at rest, encryption in transit. Tick the right boxes in your cloud infrastructure. All of that sort of stuff, but also be very aware of what you're actually trying to defend against. That's the key thing.
Oh, I've got a great one to end today. It's Data Privacy Day or Data Protection Day. And the best quote I heard was, you need to Marie Kondo your data. The woman that doesn't spark joy, throw it out, do your tidying up. And so if you don't need to keep the data, don't keep it. Because if you're going to have a data breach, do you want to report one that had 5,000 records or 50,000 records? And so even when you're building your systems in now, think, how long do we need to keep this for? Like if somebody signs up for a free trial, build it in then and there. If the thing's inactive after 21 days, bin it, delete it. Because otherwise, in 2-3 years' time, you are sitting there with those 50,000 records that you can't justify keeping. So keep the least amount of data, and even things like, do you need date of birth or do you actually just need their birthday? Because 4th of May is a really innocuous piece of information. 4th of May 1985 is a really powerful piece of information. That's something you use to log into your bank account. So on that one as well, just do it. Marie Kondo your data.
Love it. That's brilliant. No, it was really, really helpful, guys. Hopefully there's been lots of hints and tips that the audience can take away. As I did say, we were recording the event so we can put it up under YouTube and we can watch back if you want to listen in to any more of the hints and tips online. And I'm just going to share your details if you're happy enough, Andrea and Simon, your email addresses. Are you okay? GDPR check here before I share them with the group. So if anybody's got any further questions or wants to follow up, please do so directly to Andrea or Simon or through us at Raise. And thanks very much, guys, for joining. Really do appreciate taking the time out, and look forward to seeing you again at our next Tech for Non-Tech event. We'll be running in February. Keep in touch. And if you have any questions at all on cybersecurity, please just shout.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Have a good evening, guys. Cheerio.
Thanks, Jenny.
That's great. There we go. Brilliant. No, thank you very much, guys, for joining. Really worked really well, nice and slick, and some good questions and good topics. So nice, short and sweet. So thank you.
Super. See you then.
That's brilliant. Wonderful.